Hi, everybody. My name is Shubham. I head product and partnerships at Something's Brewing. As you might know, Something's Brewing is an e-commerce platform and a general platform for all things coffee. The idea behind the session was to explain we basically learned over the last 1.5 years that not a lot of people know a lot about, is it audible? Yeah, okay. Not a lot of people know a lot of things about espresso machines, and machines start at a few thousand rupees and go all the way up to a few lakh rupees. So a lot of people keep asking us the same questions, and we're creating content around this topic as well. That is going to be recorded and uploaded on YouTube. But in the meantime, we also wanted to do a few live sessions. One, to keep it interactive, engaging, and two, so we also understand what are the things that you truly want to know more about when we discuss espresso machines. So I have an idea of how I want to take this session, and I will be starting in a minute. But please feel free to interrupt me at any given point. If you don't want to speak, unmute and speak up, just type the message in. Vivek will help us out with, or Rahul will help us out with reading the question out. But interrupt, feel free. And I want to try and keep half an hour of me talking and the last half an hour for questions regardless, but it might extend a little more. Right. So before we start, does anybody have any questions? Because it's going to be a very heavy topic. It's going to get slightly technical. And if it's getting too technical and a lot of people feel like that's not what they came here for, let me know and we'll tailor it accordingly, because it's the first session we're doing on equipment, on machines. So I'll give it a few seconds, and if there's nothing, I'll start with where I'm at. Okay, awesome. Thank you. So let's begin. So what we've lined up in front of you in this beautiful array are different kinds of coffee machines. These are all machines from different brands that we represent in India. Uh, Before I get into talking about these machines, I'm going to talk about the two basic things that one should understand when they are looking for an espresso machine. Right. The first thing is, what is an espresso machine and what are the different kinds of machines available in the market. So an espresso machine is nothing but a machine that has a pump in it and a heating element. So a pump builds pressure, and espresso in Italian means press, which is the pressure. And the boiler or the heating element brings the water up to a certain temperature so you can brew, take hot water out, froth your milk, etc. Now, espresso machines are of many different types, but before we get into the different types of espresso machines, what are the other kinds of coffee makers, right? So espresso or a pressed beverage is pressurized, and then there are non-pressurized machines, which are like coffee drip makers, hot drip makers, cold brew makers, etc. We're not venturing into that. We're talking about the hardcore espresso type machines, which are popularized in Europe and Italy. So the broad categorization of espresso machines starts with semi-automatics and fully automatics, right? So I have a lot of semi-automatics here because a lot of the people who are avid home brewers want to get into more control over their brewing and experimentation. Hence, we're going to focus on semi-automatics, but I will touch upon super automatics. See, technically, semi-automatics and super automatics are two different categorizations, but in this, there are further subcategorizations. You have fully automatic, super automatic, semi-automatic, just automatic. So we won't get into that as well because it just becomes unnecessary. Before we move into the main topic, which is semi-automatic espresso machines, I have one fully automatic here for you, which is by Seco. Now, so you know the fundamental difference between an automatic / fully automatic / super automatic and a semi-automatic. Now, both of them brew with pressure. Both of them will have a milk module inside of it where you can froth milk, but the fundamental difference happens in the steps in brewing. In a fully automatic, you press a button, say I press espresso. There is one chamber where coffee beans go in. There is a inbuilt grinder. The beans are ground. There is a water section. This water moves through into a pump. Through the pump, it moves into a thermoblock or boiler, and we'll get into that in the semi-automatics. So it moves into the heating element. The coffee is ground. It is a puck is made, which is basically a set of ground coffee, and the machine automatically gets the puck ready, right? Presses it in. Now, once that happens, and you press espresso, your water will move from the boiler or the heating element into the brewing chamber, where the water comes in contact with coffee for about 30 seconds to 1 minute. and you have a espresso, that is a concentrated shot of coffee that comes out of your machine, right? And if you have a milk beverage, then it would separately take milk and froth it. We're not going to get into that as well. But it's basically automatic. You press a button and you get your coffee out. In a semi-automatic, that one step process becomes a two, three, four, five, how many other steps you want to call it. Fundamentally, this is your portafilter. And what the fully automatic machine does, it takes the coffee that is ground automatically and put into a puck and ready to brew. That happens over here. So you take your portafilter out of your semi-automatic machine. You take either ground coffee or grind your coffee. Same. The milk steaming happens automatically in the fully automatic. In the semi-automatics, there is a steam wand, and I will get into how the internal components of this work. But there's a steam wand. You put your cold milk in your jar, you take this up and you start steaming, right? And basically that's introducing steam pressure from the boiler of the machine into your milk, and that's how it foams. So I'm not going to speak about these machines over here, or this machine over here. I'm now going to go into what we're going to discuss. Before that, do we have any questions? Okay, cool. So now we're going to start the main crux of the matter and what we're all here for, semi-automatics, right? Machines that give you the most control over brewing and help you improve the quality of your coffee. There are various different technologies in semi-automatic machines, basically, the ones with the separate portafilters. You have at the entry level, you have something that is called a steam pressure boiler. So if you go on Amazon, you'll see these machines for about 3K, 4K, 5K, maybe 6K. Maybe even 8K actually, 8,000 rupees. How those machines work is that there is a pump. Like most machines, it's a cheap pump, but there is a pump to get water up to a certain, we're talking about steam pressure. So steam pressure machines don't have a pump. So in all these machines here, you actually have a pump that takes water at low pressure and puts it through 9 bar into the heating element. A steam pressure machine works more like a mocha pot. A mocha pot is something that uses steam pressure to create pressure. So instead of having a pump, there is just a heating element, which is a die-cast aluminium, usually aluminium because it's cheap, kind of boiler, which holds very little amount of water, and it heats up and it seals. And there's a lot of pressure built, and that pressure basically comes out into your coffee maker. Now we don't have that machine here because we don't sell those at the moment, because we truly believe that the entry level of great espresso with current technology is around the 20K mark. We are kind of figuring out if we can get some steam pressure based machines. The fundamental drawback of the steam pressure machine is, one, there is no pump. So the pressure that you get out of that machine is going to be 2 to 4 bar, as opposed to a 9 bar pressure that you need to brew through espresso. The other fundamental drawback is that the pressure and the temperature is not consistent. The pressure is actually built up only by heating water. So if you heat up water, there's steam, and that steam pressure, just like a steam engine, comes out when you're brewing. So there's no consistency of pressure, there's no consistency of temperature, and it's relatively lower pressure and higher temperature. Lower pressure doesn't help with the extraction. Higher temperature is even worse because that will burn your coffee. That is your steam pressure boiler, and that is the most fundamental thing I want you to understand. The difference between a 5K espresso machine and anything upwards of 20,000 rupees, right, is usually going to be that these machines come with pumps and true heating elements. This is, I know a lot of people are going to have questions in this section. So if we have any questions here, yeah, sorry, Rahul, tell me. Okay, great question. So a Bellman stovetop, a mocha pot, all of these are steam pressure machines because they ultimately build up like pressure cookers thanks to steam. But the fundamental difference between a Bellman and a Budan or any BLT mocha pot, as opposed to the machines I'm talking about, are that in these machines you have more control over how much pressure is being built up. You can take it off of the gas, or you can control the amount of water that you're putting in. With the steam pressure based machines, the pressure is built up in the boiler and it happens every day. So if you use a Bellman or a mocha pot, you brew, you clean, right? In those, the brewing chamber isn't cleaned and the pressure is built up day by day. So what will happen is I have a few friends who bought those machines when they started out, and after a year, I mean, it's great. It's very good value for money. I'm not telling anybody not to buy those. Please buy that and start your brewing journey. It's a great step moving away from instant. But what happens is your coffee will start tasting burnt over time, because what happens is that it starts heating up too much, and that excess heat comes out when you're extracting. So over time, your coffee will start tasting more burnt. But initially, you may not see those negative aspects of using a steam pressure boiler machine. The other aspect which is important is that the frothing of milk in those machines, ultimately, all of these machines use a boiler for steam pressure. Now, in those machines, the boiler is small with lesser pressure, although steam pressure usually is around 1.5 bar. The problem with those machines is not the pressure when you're frothing your milk, but the amount of heat that can come out in a consistent period. Because it's such a small boiler, 100 to 100 ml, you can't get consistent heat for a very long time on the milk frother. So you need a slightly bigger boiler. That is the other drawback. So your milk frothing won't be as consistent as you would like. But I hope I answered your question with regard to the Bellman and the Budan or any other kind of mocha pot. Do we have anything else? No? Okay, awesome. So now that you know what a steam pressure machine is, fundamentally, what we need to understand is that there is water, right? That's the first step of brewing espresso. Then there's a pump. The pump takes this water at 9 bar or higher, puts it into the heating element. The heating element brings the water up to the right mark. Then we start extraction. That goes into the group head or the brewing chamber. The group head is this section, and that's where your coffee comes out. So we discussed steam pressure machines don't have that a pump section. All the other machines come with a pump. They come with a heating element. The next step that you need to understand, why is there a 25,000 rupee machine and a 2 lakh? These should actually be interchanged, but sorry about that. Why is there a 2.5 lakh rupee machine? And what is the difference? The first thing you need to understand is how the water is heated, right? The water that is heated in these machines, there can be a thermoblock section, which is something you would see in these two machines, in this machine. Then you have a boiler, which is a single boiler. You have a heat exchanger, which is here, and you have a dual boiler, right? I'm going to get into each of these now. So as I said, you keep the steam boiler out of it or the steam pressure out of it. You have a thermoblock, single boiler, heat exchanger, dual boiler. What is the difference between these three and these two? Thermoblock versus the boilers. Heat exchangers are kind of boiler-based machine. Boilers versus thermoblocks. The main difference and the best analogy I can think of is if you're over 25, 30 years old, you would have seen those small little geysers that you see in a lot of places, really tiny geysers, what we call instant geysers. You turn it on, hot water comes out, and you see you see bigger geysers that basically take 15 minutes to heat up, but then they give you hot water for a very long time and they're consistent. They suddenly don't, when you're showering, it's not hot water, cold water, hot water, cold water. It's consistently either hot or cold. So that is the same exact analogy you need to understand when we talk about thermoblocks and boilers. Boilers take longer to come up to speed, but they are more consistent. They have more capacity, and they are overall better in the long run. And thermoblocks are instant. They're very quick to start. Like these two machines will be ready in a minute. So there's an advantage there for home brewers. They're relatively consistent. Today's thermoblocks are actually very, very advanced. Like this one has a PID controller within the thermoblock, which we can get into also later. I don't know how much in depth I should get into these different technologies, but I want to first make you understand thermoblock versus boiler, right? So thermoblocks, the biggest advantage is they're quick. They don't take too much startup time. They will never burn your coffee. So as we discussed, if you ever remember those instant geysers, they will never give you water that's enough to burn you, right? The same way, these machines will never actually burn your coffee because the thermoblocks by nature don't reach 100. And as you all know, brewing coffee at 100 is a cardinal sin, 100 degrees centigrade. It'll burn your coffee. If you want to brew on 90, 92. So a thermoblock fundamentally is quick. It's easy. It won't burn your coffee. Boiler is more consistent, better life, less... when we talk about scaling, there are some advantages. We get into that later. But ultimately, better for brewing coffee and steaming milk because boilers ultimately give you more consistent steam pressure as well, which we'll get into. Are we clear about thermoblocks and boiler-based machines? Do we have any questions there? Then I'll get into the three kinds of boiler-based machines, which is also very important. Okay, cool. I think the pacing is okay. Thank you very much. But coming back to this, so thermoblocks ultimately are relatively cheaper to produce. Maybe one point we'll try and get a thermoblock to show you how it looks inside. So just like the instant geysers, it has thin pipes It has thin, mostly aluminum pipes. Water goes at room temperature through the pump. I forgot to tell you this. And goes to the pipes. It's brought up to speed, brought up to the right temperature, and then ultimately comes out. So the thin pipes, it gets hot. That's a thermoblock. Now in the boilers, you have a single boiler, heat exchanger, which is a kind of single boiler, and a dual boiler. Now, let's come back to understanding how espresso machines work, right? Espresso machines serve two core functions. The most important one, obviously, brewing espresso. The second core function, if you like milk-based coffees, maybe the first core function for you is steaming your milk or frothing your milk. Now, you need to understand that we discussed brewing coffee is between 90 to 93 degrees centigrade. But to create pressure to froth your milk, you need a lot of pressure that comes purely from the boiler. So it's 1.5 bar. It's not coming from the pump. How that is achieved is when your temperature goes from 90 degrees for your brewing temperature in the boiler to 120 degrees or higher. Now, in a single boiler machine, one boiler does both functions, creates water to heats up the boiler to froth your milk as well as brew coffee. So you can imagine you take your single boiler machine, you start brewing, coffee is coming out. Now now you tell the boiler, okay, my coffee is ready, cool. I go into the milk frothing mode. So now the machine is like, oh shit, my coffee is at 93. I need to go to 120 to froth my milk. The machine will be like, okay, it'll go into overdrive. It'll take 30 seconds to 1 minute. The boiler will go from 90 degrees to 120 degrees. And the moment that happens, your machine is ready to froth your milk. I hope you understand. It's the same machine, the same boiler inside. There are two separate thermostats. There are two separate receivers of the information. One says, get ready for coffee. The other says, get ready for steaming your milk. So in thermoblocks and single boilers, in both of them, you will have the same concern where you have to wait between 30 seconds to 1 minute to take your boiler / thermoblock up or down, depending on the function you want to use your machine for. And which is the biggest reason you will never see these machines in cafes. And another reason why they don't work very well in restaurant setups, because you ultimately will take upwards of 3-4 minutes to brew 1 cup of coffee, which is perfectly fine at home, but not very, very effective in the cafe setup, right? So how do we solve for this? There are two ways, both expensive, obviously, more expensive than the single boiler, but very effective solutions. The more innovative solution, and is also slightly more reasonably priced, is the heat exchanger system, which is a modification of the single boiler. I told you guys that the single boiler takes water up and down with the two thermostats. What the heat exchanger does is there's still one boiler in the machine. That boiler is always at 120. That boiler is always for steam pressure. It's always for frothing your milk. How does the brewing happen then, and how can you do both simultaneously in that? Well, there is this thin pipe that goes from your pump. So the pump has two outlets. One is for the boiler, the regular boiler, and the other is for the coffee pipe. Now that pipe takes water from your pump, goes through the boiler. You can just imagine this. So you have I'm gonna try and give you an analogy here. So imagine this is your boiler, right? Now imagine this is my single boiler in the heat exchanger. Now this holds water consistently at 120 degrees. I have a separate pipe that is going through separate pipe. Thanks, Karam. Separate pipe going through the pump, and that pipe carries room temperature water. This pipe is sitting inside the boiler. So what happens is water enters at room temperature, and this is at 120. This brings it close to 100, thanks to the conduction, right? So now this water directly goes into your brewing chamber. This water directly goes into the brewing chamber, and this boiler is consistently at 120. So if you see, I can froth milk and I can extract coffee, right? Which is super cool. It's a super innovative way to actually use a single boiler to do both simultaneous milk steaming as well as brewing coffee. Now, the disadvantage, very obviously, as most of you would be able to identify, is that there's very little control over the water in the pipe, right? Because it's ultimately going through. So by design, it's going to slightly heat up a little bit more than it should. So the good folks at all the fancy brands come up with a solution, which is a dual boiler machine. two separate boilers, a large boiler for water and milk frothing, and a slightly smaller coffee boiler, which consistently keeps coffee at 90 degrees. Now, today, this is the holy grail of espresso machines. The dual boiler machine ultimately right now stands no competition to any of the other machines because the separate boiler for coffee and a separate boiler for milk, sorry, frothing your milk. And you have brands like Delit, Lama, Jocko, all the best brands in the world have a dual boiler machine. In a very quick way, this was the lowdown on the different technologies of espresso machines. There are obviously a lot more things that I want to discuss. Do we have any questions as of now? No, nothing. Is this helpful? Am I? Would you want me to elaborate more on these three, four technologies, or can I go into the features that somebody should look into when they're buying an espresso machine? Yeah, of a thermoblock machine. Okay, so the first key drawback would be that if you compare with any of the boiler based machines, your espresso will be at a slightly lower temperature. That's the first drawback. From my testing, I usually see a 5 degree difference where a boiler based machine brings out coffee at a slightly higher temperature of about 4 to 5 degrees than a thermoblock machine. The second disadvantage of a thermoblock, which you asked for disadvantages, right? Right. Okay. So the second disadvantage would obviously be, and the same lines, that the milk steaming takes a lot longer. So in a boiler-based machine, depending on the wattage and the boiler size, your milk steaming can take anywhere from on a linear mini 10 seconds to about maximum 25 seconds, not more than that, right? Unless you want to literally burn your milk. But on a thermoblock, it starts at about 30 seconds. So it will take at least about 30 seconds to froth your milk, and it can go up to 50 seconds. Now, that's important if you have to do back-to-back cups, but if you're doing this at home, I don't think you'll even notice. Those are the two key disadvantages of thermoblock, according to me. The third one, I mean, I wouldn't call this a disadvantage, but a thermoblock ultimately is, it there's nothing actually to do with, it's going to relatively have a shorter life, to be honest, because a thermoblock has thin pipes. Now, wherever in any kind of water-based system, whether it's an espresso machine or any kind of a geyser where you heat water up, your thinner pipes are more susceptible to scaling, because if this is the cross section through which water can go versus this in a regular machine, then the smaller cross section will be susceptible to more scaling and clog up faster. That's why your arteries and your heart clogs up before your other stuff, right? I think it's slightly thinner. But the point is that thermoblocks have some disadvantages, but they're great entry-level machines. They give you very good quality coffee and froth your milk. In fact, a thermoblock machine is usually what most people start with as their first home espresso machine. But I hope I answered your question. And the question before that was, how long would my thermoblock machine last for? Right. So a lot of this depends on your on how you okay. Most importantly, the whole the most important thing in using your home espresso machine is the quality of water you put in. I'll drink tap water, but my espresso machine gets aquafina. Right. So that's purely because you don't want tap water has more salts, more minerals, and that when you heat for a long period leads to scaling. And scaling basically needs to be removed. I mean, scale needs to be removed. You can descale every year. So if you do like a once in a year service or once in 6 months service of your machine, you should be fine. But thermoblocks are more likely to build up scale than boilers, but boilers are also very much likely to build up scale. You can't escape from scale. If you use high quality water, that is RO purified water with less minerals, less salt, less calcium, less magnesium, etc., you can expect a longer life of your machine. I can't throw numbers like this, but we sold our first Budan 1.5 years ago in India, and it's still running very well. So you can easily expect 3-4 years, like without, even if you're not even if you don't love your machine that much. But I mean, 3-4 years is something you can definitely expect. Is there any big difference between the thermoblock coffee made from a thermoblock machine as opposed to a boiler-based machine? Taste is more a factor of the person brewing than the machine you use. And I sell machines. It's always easier for me to say, yes, this is better. And that's not a simple answer. It's what a salesperson would say. But the reality is that you can give this machine to a barista and you can give this machine to a novice, and hands down, 100 out of 100 times the coffee of this machine will be better. That's because it's not about technology can only take you so much ahead. It's all about how you use it, right? I mean, you can have a nice watch with a chronograph. If you do not use it, doesn't matter. So there is no difference if you give this machine to a pro barista and this machine to a novice. But if you know how to brew coffee, there is a world of a difference. This machine will ultimately have a lower temperature of your final beverage. It's the first thing, and takes slightly longer to brew. This machine will be more consistent in your. So for example, this machine has a PID controller, right? What is that? A PID controller basically helps you to set your brewing temperature up to the right degree. Now, if you set it to the degree you think is perfect over the years as you brew every day, you will notice certain brewing temperature is perfect for a certain kind of coffee. That won't lead to burning of your coffee. So there is a difference, but if you are starting out, these machines should do just fine. Obviously, if you're like the kind of person who buys a machine and wants to that's like your holy grail that's going to be there for the next 10 years, 20 years, then obviously you go for a dual boiler, a heat exchanger, something like that. But fundamentally, there is a difference. But if you're starting out, it'll take you about 3 to 6 months to actually start creating different kinds of coffees that have a very big difference between the two technologies. Let's get into another very important factor. I covered water. I really wanted to cover water. Use RO purified water. And from my personal analysis, I find Bisleri and Kinley to have more salts than Aquafina. So if I don't have RO or have a bubble top, I just go for Aquafina for my espresso machine. And you can do these tests you get these water testing kits these days. You can do a test at home as well. Coming back to the machines, three things I want to discuss first are some of the machines you'll see these programmable buttons, and some of the machines you see no programmable buttons, it's just knobs. Now, programmable buttons basically let you set your shot time basis what you like. So a single shot can be a 15-second, 20-second, 30-second brew. A double shot can be 25 seconds, 40 seconds, etc. Whereas these more artisanal machines, they don't come with these programmable buttons because they kind of expect you to give that input basis how your shot is flowing. So ultimately, you'll see these programmable buttons right at the entry level where they expect people not to know what they're doing. And these are good in a way that it takes the guessing out of the way. But the beauty is you can also pull untimed shots from, say, this machine. You don't have to go for a timed shot. That's the first thing. The second thing is the portafilter, which is a very, very important factor of brewing. Now, if you look at the Budan espresso machine, it's got a full-size 58 portafilter, as do the machines that are 10 times the price. And if you look at, say, the Solace machine, it's got a 54 portafilter. Does this make a huge difference in your coffee? Absolutely not. Where does it make a difference? Well, it's easier to get accessories for a 58 portafilter, and by accessories, I mean currently he's asking a tamper and a leveler. When I say accessories, I mean these little things that allow you to level your shot and tamp your shot. So it's easier to get accessories for a 58 portafilter. Thank you. And I'll keep the tamper as opposed to the 54 portafilter, which can get slightly harder, but not to worry. This machine actually comes with its own tamper. So these are aesthetically important points. Like this is a sleek machine. So to put a 58 on this would be, sorry, what's a portafilter? Okay, my bad. This is a portafilter. A portafilter. So remember I told you on the fully automatic, the coffee is ground and it goes into a brewing chamber. That happens manually in a semi-automatic. What you actually do is you grind your coffee. Let's actually do this for you. So I'm taking the portafilter in which the coffee brews. This is the grinder. I'm going to grind fresh coffee. You can even use pre-ground coffee. So this is espresso grind size coffee. You can use pre-ground coffee. It's fairly fine. Right? We're done grinding. Now, what we're going to do here is, see, if I just take this coffee and this, no, not me, this thing, cool, thanks. If I fundamentally take this, attach this and press a button, it's going to be complete chaos because what's going to happen is your water is going to come from the machine at 9 bar. But there is no resistance here. This is just like fluff. It's like fluffy. So the water is just going to drain through. So what I'm going to call this is my puck in the portafilter. Now I have to ready my puck for extraction. How do I ready my puck? I'm basically going to level this to make it even. I'm going to take a tamper and put about 20 kilos of pressure, plus minus, and there my puck is ready. Now, when I put this in my espresso machine, all that 9 bar of pressure won't make the spread. It'll just make it flow, right? So your this is your portafilter. The idea is that your portafilter size doesn't impact your brewing as much as you would think. It's more of an aesthetic thing. Like you can't put a 58 portafilter on a street machine like this. But do know accessorization becomes easier with a full size 58 portafilter. Then you have your group head. So your group head is in between your heating element and your portafilter. That is where the brewing, the magic happens, right? So this has a regular group head. This has its own group head. Your Rancilio has an E61 group head. Your Bezerra, this BZ10 has its own integrated group head. So this is more like IP that a lot of brands create of their own. The major difference would be that an E61 group head is basically a group head that was designed in 1961. It's patented. It's a very big group head. It's very heavy. It's sturdy, but it takes a long time to heat up. So what the guys at Bezerra, which is a 100-year-old Italian company, they created their own group head that gets preheated in 10 minutes. And then you have La Marzocco, who made saturated group heads. All I'm trying to say is that it doesn't matter as much when you're starting your journey out, but if the next stage of brewing espresso, once you're done with the basics after a few years, you're definitely going to want to look into the kind of group head that the machine has, the kind of heating element it has, the pumps. The pumps are also very important once you start getting into the depths of espresso. But do we have any questions? Then please interrupt me if there are questions. What are the main points to look for when you're looking at a group head? Actually, this is a good question. I want to start with what are the points to look at when looking at an espresso machine. I'll summarize that and we'll put group head in this, right? I'm assuming you're buying an espresso machine for home and you're looking at a semi-automatic. Water tank, your water tank capacity doesn't matter that much. दिन में अगर एक बार ही भरना है, हफ्ते में एक बार ही, honestly it shouldn't impact your decision of buying an espresso machine. It's as good as looking at the fuel tank capacity when you're buying a car and you have to live in the city. Doesn't matter. So what you look at is your heating element. So whether it's thermoblock, boiler, heat exchanger, dual boiler, right? You look at what is what are the features over here. So is it programmable buttons, non-programmable buttons? Does it have a pressure gauge? What are the additional features? Like the Budan espresso machine is a short timer, which none of the other machines have. The Solace is a PID. So these are frills, right? Now, you're not going to get the same features in every machine. So you need to decide what is more important to you. If you're going to pre-program your shots, the timer really doesn't matter. But if you're going to do a manual shot every time, the timer could be the most important feature for you. So it depends on how you brew your coffee. The group head, honestly, the entry level is not something you really look into, but do realize that an E61 group head is in commercial machines and it takes a very long time to heat up. It's fancy, but it's like you're driving a Lamborghini in the streets of Bangalore. It's not possible. It's pointless, right? You're not going to be able to get the most out of it. E61 group head is great if you're going to pull 100 shots, but on a home machine, it's overkill. So you want to look for a group head that doesn't take too long to heat up, like the Budan, like the Solace, like actually all of these machines over here. Because this is also like a group that is designed by Bezerra themselves to reduce the time into half by basically reducing the size and the weight of it. So just don't go for the big bulky group heads for a home machine unless your machine has a very high wattage. Like this, the Lelit Bianca has a good wattage of more than 1400 watts, I think, or around 1400 watts. So it has the capability to heat up also really fast. So there should be no mismatch. But that's regarding the group head. Huh? Is there a reason why a portafilter has two spouts? Okay. The first thing, you can actually put a large basket and okay. So in Italy or in a lot of cafes, if you go, people pull out 2 shots of coffee from one portafilter. You can very well, those like when I make mine, I take them out separately, but you can very well dose them out in the same cup. Ultimately, say a basket size, which these days an average for specialty is around 16 grams. You can actually pull 2 full-size shots of coffee out of it, like 16 grams of coffee in, 40 grams out. That becomes 220 ml espressos. There's no actual, I mean, it's just by design. You can actually pull 2 shots simultaneously. There is no straight answer. I mean, if you have a friend, you can actually take 2 shots out separately. If you ever go to a cafe next, just see, they always measure them separately unless you're going to like a high-end specialty cafe where the recipe is made in such a way where they use 16 grams of coffee for one shot where they'll dose both in one. You also have mass portafilters with a single spout, and you also have bottomless portafilters which actually don't have any spout. You can just see how the extraction is happening. So there's no particular reason just to pull two separate shots simultaneously. Okay, great question. So group head is just dissection. Usually it's going to be a metal. Plastic would just melt. So the E61 group head I told you about when it was made 6 years ago was a 9 pound or like 4 kilo group head, just 4 kilos for this. These days, all group heads are steel, and all group heads will be steel, unless the brewing is happening inside. Like, for example, this Seco has a brewing inside, so this is plastic because no brewing is happening here. If you're looking at body, is the question correct? You asked me what should the body, the group head. So the group head's going to be steel, unless the brewing is happening inside where there's plastic outside. But if you're talking about the body, you have fiber and plastic bodies as well, and they don't really heat up too much. So it's not really a concern, but stainless steel obviously looks better, but it's more susceptible to scratches, obviously. Yeah, I hope I answered your question. Group heads are going to be metal, and there's no preference as such. That's it? Okay. Okay, so 1 second. Let me just see what else we would need to cover. So we've discussed what is important before you buy an espresso machine, different technologies. Motor, the last thing that I wanted to discuss. Yes, thank you. So a very important factor to understand at the higher end of espresso machines is the motor or the pump that is in these machines. There are two main kinds of pumps in the coffee world. One is a rotary pump and the other is a vibratory pump or a vibration pump, right? Now, a vibration pump makes more noise. It works based on magnetics. And it has a slightly lesser life, but it's also lower priced. A rotary pump is more professional. It doesn't work on magnetic technology, but it works actually on like there's like a wheel inside which basically moves. It's mechanical. It's a mechanical pump. It's slightly more expensive, but it's got a much longer life and lesser noise. So at the lower end of machines, you will see vibration pumps. At the higher end of machines, you'll see rotary pumps. That is by nature of the pump itself. Another important thing is the vibratory pumps are smaller. So on the lower end machines, you can fit them in very easily, but the rotary pumps, the mechanical pumps are larger. This is just for you to note, not that this should not be a buying decision. Unless you're going to brew your coffee at 4 a.m. and you have family that sleeps at home, then the vibratory pump will be a problem. But this is for you to note that a rotary pump is better and a vibratory pump is not as good as a rotary pump, but it doesn't make that much of a difference at the lower end of the machines because you're ultimately going to get itne mein itna hi milta hai, and that's what it is. But it's good to know that when you're buying a higher end machine, does it have because some very expensive machines come with vibratory pumps, and that's not wise. It's going to make more noise. It's going to be a shorter life. Why would you want to get a high end machine with a vibratory pump or a vibration pump? Okay, so usually lesser priced machines would have vibratory pumps. Each model, a lot of models actually, we're launching a brand very soon, and I don't want to say it here because it's not formalized yet, but that brand has every model as a vibratory pump and a rotary pump as well, because they want to give you the option on what kind of machine you want to get. For example, this is a vibratory pump. This is a vibratory pump. This is the rotary pump. One quick way for you to understand if it's a vibratory pump or rotary pump or not, it's a hack, is to understand if the machine can be plumbed in. Plumbed in basically means that instead of putting water into the water tank manually, there is a pipe that goes in, like in cafes, right? And the water directly flows in. Plumbing in espresso machines can only be done if the machine has a rotary pump, 99% of the time. Vibratory pump, it's not possible. So if the machine can be plumbed in, you're safe to say that it has a rotary pump and not a vibratory pump. I'm going to also, great question. I'm going to cover 4 topics in 4 minutes, 1 minute each, because you asked a quick primer. The first one is a PID, right? So, okay, what is a PID? A PID is a device that is digitally going to control any function. Usually, when you buy an air conditioner, you have a thermostat, which is basically which measures temperature, which basically turns on and off, and it's mechanical, so it's slow. It can't happen 10 times every second, 1,000 times every second. It happens 10 times a minute, and it's a switch that goes on and off. A PID is a digital switch. It's basically code written in a chip. that basically says on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off, and it's signals, it's sent through signals. So what a PID does is it takes that mechanical process and makes it a digital process. That is the core function of a PID. In espresso machines, PIDs are used to control boiler temperature. Now just take that concept and put it in a boiler. A boiler would reach 90 degrees. It'll send the message, turn off the heating element, it'll turn off, and it'll say turn on again at 88. So it'll cross 90, reach 92, it'll turn off, then it'll go to 88. By the time it reaches 88, it'll send the message, turn it on a mechanical system, and it'll vary between 88 and 90, 88 and 92 when you set it 90. So it's almost never at the right temperature because it's a wave function. It takes a lot of time. It's mechanical. A PID will do it within seconds. It'll go on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off. So the moment it goes to 90.1, 90.2, it'll turn off. The moment it goes to 89.1, 89.5, it'll go back to 90. So it happens very quick. What it gives you is consistency of temperature. So PIDs are important for consistency of temperature. Pressure gauge. The pressure gauge or a manometer is basically going to tell you is like a check on how your machine is performing. Some machines you'll see one pressure gauge, which is the lower end, and some machines you'll see two pressure gauges or two gauges in one circle. Basically, what it tells you, one of them, if you only see one in a machine, it's going to tell you the brewing pressure. So it will vary from 0 bar to 16 bar, 0 bar to 18 bar, and the right brewing temperature is 9 bar, which translates to 130 psi. And your steam pressure, which usually should be around 1.5 bar. So a pressure gauge basically is just like telling you what speed you're going at, and it's more of a check than something you change. Backflash. Okay. Backflashing is so in finance, you'll see a lot of fancy terms thrown, but it's basically nothing. It's basically to exclude people out of the financial system. The same way in coffee, we have a few of these terms. One of them is backflashing. Backflashing is absolutely nothing. But for example, when you let me show you what this. If I turn on this machine and I'm brewing, it's brewing right now. Now I turn it off. This is my basket. Let me just take this out. This is my basket, right? My basket has holes. One sec, Rahul. Yeah. So my basket has holes in it, right? Through which I extract my coffee. Now, backflashing is something I would do when I just want to clean the machine. It's nothing but cleaning your machine. Your basket is removed. This basket is removed. It's very hot, so I don't want to touch it right now. But this basket is removed and a blind basket is put into this, which has no holes in the bottom. It won't let any water through the portafilter. So a blind basket is put, some cleaning powder is put. I'm going to basically then just lock this in and start the machine. There is nothing that's going to come out. The water is basically going to go back into the machine, out, in and out. And I'm basically using, and I keep this on for 20 seconds off, on for 20 seconds off. So I'm back flushing to clean my espresso machine. It's basically cleaning your espresso machine. You're basically not letting coffee come out. Super simple. It's not complicated. The last point was pre-infusion. Okay. So pre-infusion is nothing but prepping your shot of coffee or preparing your shot of coffee. Remember, I made this very nice tamped set of coffee, right? Now, imagine if I were to put water through this at 9 bar or 130 psi. I mean, fancy watches go up to like lesser psi than that, right? Pressure-wise, it's gonna completely spoil how the puck is, and it's gonna channel. So it's gonna move a lot of the coffee around, and channeling is basically when water, like most liquids, will find the path of least resistance, and basically you will have under extraction, uneven extraction. So what a pre-infusion would do, which a lot of machines, including the Budan, has the feature. The first 5, 10, 20 seconds, and in a lever-based machine, your pre-infusion is basically like in the Lelit Bianca. It's basically the rate at which you open the valve, right? Is how you would control pre-infusion. It's basically the first 5, 10, 20 seconds. Water is slowly brought into contact with your puck of coffee. So it gets ready, it gets wet, and there's no channeling or there's no messy under extraction happening. So it's basically just pre-wetting your shot for your shot of coffee. It's like blooming your coffee if you're doing a manual brew. Portafilter size, according to me, is mostly a vanity metric. There is very little difference between the shot of coffee that you would get out of your 54 versus 58 mm, but it's important to understand what is more important than portafilter size is your basket, right? if you look at these baskets under a microscope, the quality of these holes and the evenness of these holes, this is not a microscope, I'm just showing you what a basket is, can be really, really uneven. And that can spoil the quality of your coffee. So you have professional baskets, you have IMS, you have VST, you have crazy professional baskets that basically you can put in your portafilter to extract better, more even coffee. More than portafilter size, look into basket size. Fundamentally, if you go for a 58 portafilter, you're golden. So just look for a 58 portafilter ideally. Or 54 is great as well if you care more about, say, for example, the Solace, a beautiful machine for home, sells purely on its looks, very sleek. And people who buy this don't mind the basket size because it comes with a steel portafilter. But if you know you're going to move into, say, accessorization or upgrading your machine later, and you want to buy tampers, it just makes sense to get a standardized 58 portafilter. Since we spoke about portafilter size, another important thing, like if you look at, for example, the Solace and even the Budan, these are heavy portafilters, right? These are solid portafilters. There's no plastic handle, so I'm going to break off. I mean, the handle is plastic, but it's not plastic attached to the heavy steel portafilter. What I'm trying to say is that cheaper machines where you have a plastic handle completely and just a steel group, steel basket section, they are more likely to break off. So you're not going to worry about breaking at this price point. Huh? Right. I'm not sure if this is a single boiler or dual boiler. I'm guessing this is going to be a heat exchanger machine, so single boiler. Fundamentally, at that price point, you're going to be taking too much space at home. It takes too much power. They take longer to get ready to brew because they're commercial machines. They have those larger E61 group heads I spoke about, which are overkill and don't contribute to quality of coffee. You can get better quality coffee out of any home machine than maybe Astoria or a Rancilio single group at home, because those machines are smaller and they actually will come up to speed a little quicker. Those the Astorias, Rancilios, those commercial, and I'm not talking about the Sylvia, I'm talking about the commercial machines. They have larger boilers, which are better for back-to-back shots. So if I had to put my money on, say, 20 back-to-back shots, I may not use this, I may use what you mentioned, but at home, you're not going to want to do that. You want to pull those 5 shots or 4 shots or 2 shots and have, okay, 10% battery remaining. Thank you. So you have, anyway, I think we're almost up, Kamal. But you're basically going to have not have that problem of having to pull multiple back-to-back shots. So they would not make great home espresso machines. They would take more power. They would take longer to get ready, and for what job, right? And more expensive. Right. Perfect. Great question. So a flare espresso maker, a Pico Presso from Wakako, a Caflano, another kind of brand which has I think it's Compresso. These are very convenient portable machines for black coffee and black coffee only, which is espresso grade black coffee. If you want to use a machine to froth milk sometimes, or get hot water out for tea, you're not going to actually be able to do that for those machines. Lovely machines, taking nothing away from the Flare or Pico Presso or any of these. But again, it goes back to use case. If you travel a lot and you have your coffee black, you may rather use a Flare or a Pico Presso. But it's not going to be as convenient on a daily basis if you're going to do it at home, because there's more components to clean. If you're going to have to basically, it's going to have like double the number of components to clean than this machine. Also, those machines need external heating sources. So with the Flare, the Pico Presso, you're going to have a kettle of water. The second thing what a lot of people look over, and what I was saying was that with all these espresso makers that we named right now, the portable ones, the Flare, the Pico Presso, your first shot is you're going to have to flush it out, yeah, because what happens is there's metal, there's a lot of metal in these machines that needs to come up to speed in terms of temperature. And that is why we wait, right, to get the portafilter hot, etc. And I think the worst thing about espresso is when it's under extracted, and you're basically going to have an under extracted first shot. So just flush out like a blank and then brew your coffee with those. That's my suggestion on using those machines.
Any local brands good enough?
A local brand of?
Any local brands good enough?
For coffee machines or coffee? I'll be honest, none of these machines are made in India. How would you define a local brand? Because for example, Cadbury is a local brand, but you get Cadbury that's made in the UK. The same way, the Budan is our brand, which is a local brand from Bangalore. Started from scratch a year and a half ago. Put a lot of love and effort into it, but it's not made in India. So it is a local brand, but the product is not made in India. So we keep spares, we service. So Budan is great. It's been a labor of love, and we have about 20 plus SKUs, 20 plus different kinds of machines. They are not made in India, but they're great machines. So
Is Buran servicing in Hyderabad?
yes, we have 30 plus service engineers across the country, and Hyderabad is one of the places where we have a service engineer. So you will get service in Hyderabad. Yeah, I mean, the Rancilio Silvia is pretty easy to maintain. The first Silvia globally came out 20 plus years ago, and those machines, 2021, those machines are still running. So, I mean, it's a home barista's dream in terms of longevity and yeah. So there are Rancidios that even we haven't sold in India, and they come to us and they just want to get a service from that. Absolutely, because those machines have been in India since way before we have been in India. So yeah, I mean they're easy to maintain. I really hope this was an interactive session. I mean, I really hope you guys had fun and you learned something new. I had a lot of fun speaking about a topic I like. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great evening and see you on the other side. Thank you. Bye. Bye.